I just wanted to welcome you all to a panel discussion. That way we're going to talk about some topics. So Dr. Strickland, did you have a leading topic you wanted to start with?
Well, first of all, as chair of Let My Doctor Practice, I just wanted to thank all of you for joining us. What a tremendous amount of expertise and history and experience in physician leadership up here that you guys have brought. So thank you so much for coming. And if any of you have any things you want to say about this topic here, I'd let you go ahead and start.
Go ahead.
I can just say one thing.
We'll start left to right.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm Dick Armstrong from the Docs4PatientCare Foundation. I think the most powerful thing among many things that Mr. David Goldhill said today and has said in his books, for me, is that he is not a doctor. He's a businessman. And he had to interact with our system in 2007 as a businessman to come to the same conclusions that many of us have come to over the last 6 to 7 years. And I think David is correct in his optimism, and I think that we will be seeing exactly what he's saying for many of the reasons which may not have been intended, and that is there are more high deductible plans currently, health savings accounts are growing, people are gradually becoming more engaged with the economics of their health care, and all of that is good. That's where we need to be going, and we'll talk about that more as this conference goes on.
Since I read his book, I've been a huge fan ever since I've read his book and learned about the stuff that he brings to light. One of my favorites, and he didn't have a chance to get to it in his talk, is some of the great examples that he uses to illustrate what happens to prices in healthcare. And he tells the story about a child who opens a lemonade stand. And that this child goes out and sells lemonade for $1 a glass, let's say. Gets the lemons and the sugar and the water and the cups and the table and goes out and sells lemonade and does very well at it until the mayor of the town comes along and says, I'm running for office. I want everybody to have a glass of lemonade on me, on the mayor. But I'm not going to pay $1 a glass. I'm going to come up with some other sort of pricing structure to figure out how I'm going to decide what to pay you for every glass of lemonade that I buy. And it turns out that no matter what model you come up with to pay for the lemonade besides pay what the seller asks, you come up with these artifacts that will inevitably, and it's too detailed to go into here, but it will inevitably drive the price of lemonade up or drive the quality of the lemonade down or both. And it's a great mini metaphor that really crystallizes, for me at least, why prices in healthcare go crazy.
Right. Well, it used to be a very simple business model where patients would pay the physician directly with whatever the negotiation was before healthcare insurance became a physician responsibility somehow. It used to be a patient responsibility, whereas they would pay, and then whatever contract they signed, then they would interact with their insurer and then get reimbursed to the degree which they had the policy. Unfortunately, since the advent around the Second World War of healthcare insurance being part of your employment package, it further dislocated the patient-physician relationship, and price, as you bring up, kind of went out the window. That is to say that there became these list prices that, well, nobody really pays, but they try to make people pay, and the insurers do what you say. They all pay a percentage through some formula in some other language which nobody quite speaks.
Right. And no matter what formula you try to come up with, there are perverse incentives that are built into that formula that either cause quality to go down, price to go up, or both. And the problem, and David, I keep coming back to him because it's a great book, but, it outlines this very well. That was in World War II when labor was short and wages were going up, and they passed this thing to, because you couldn't compete on price anymore, but you compete on benefits, correct? So now the essential definition of insurance changes. Health insurance is no longer true insurance.
Right.
It now becomes a benefit program, and David explains very well that, once you pay for something, right, it's like your college meal plan, right? Once you've paid for the college meal plan, if they ask you if you want to have lobster every Friday night, what are you going to say? Absolutely. Of course. Because it's all paid for, and once it's paid for, there's no more marginal cost for getting more stuff. then that's what's going to happen invariably.
Certainly, and in a model where the patient and the physician or any consumer and purveyor of any kind of service is disconnected and dislocated, that you can't have a true relationship because the expectations are different on both sides. The patient expects certain things and the physician or other entity expects certain things, and invariably both fail.
David spoke of this. I'm sorry, Beth. One thing that just came to my mind.
And then I'm going to totally lose my thought.
I'm sorry. David spoke of this really happening in 1965 with the passage of Medicare. And for outpatient services, that was very true. When Medicare Part B began and started paying doctors at least a portion of the doctor's fee, that began. But an interesting historical vignette is that many of you probably aren't aware that in 1955, you could purchase a sign from the American Medical Association for your primary care office that said, please feel free to discuss my fees with you, my fees for my services, because the healthiest relationship is one in which we're both informed.
I did not know
Well said. Yeah. Well, we'll be discussing more of this actually in my talk on restoring health freedom on Saturday at 3:30 Mountain Time as well. Go ahead, just before you forget your thought.
Yeah, I wrote some notes there so I can. One of the key points I think he made was about Kenneth Arrow and the study that he did and was released. It really, really set people's thinking that you cannot have health care as a market. And this is what we've been operating on for all those years since that time. And so many people still think that it's wrong, that you can't have a market in healthcare. And one of the things that we've really lost is that, as you're saying, the doctor-patient relationship, but what it ends up being is you're missing that win-win transaction that happens when you've got somebody that is informed on both sides. So when we give up that win-win and you start having things that are mandated and people aren't really choosing things that they would necessarily choose for the price that they think is worthwhile, we lose the things that drive quality and the things drive quality up, and we lose what drives the prices down. If you look across the entire world, the system that is bringing people out of poverty, not that we've solved world poverty, but we are making incredible strides with it. It's that win-win, very much a market, trade, voluntary, civil society working together on these solutions. That's what's ending world poverty. That's how we're going to be able to create access to quality, affordable health care, not through this top-down controlling, taking the primary actors away from really having to think about the cost-benefit in any kind of meaningful form. So Arrow, with the best of intentions and looking at what he saw, removed the patient as a consumer, and it's become a dirty word. Profit or anything to do with markets has become a dirty word in medicine, but it's what's driven to get us to where we are now. And so few people really understand those step-by-step things. Each step was so well intended, created these problems that then were built on and were messed with this mess. But a lot of it really does go back to saying we can't function like a market. Even though markets bring us prosperity and abundance in every other sector, somehow it's different. But look what the difference of what we're doing.
Right. Well, a free market and capitalism, even some would argue, is a bad word, but it lifts people out of poverty because you can make something or do a work, get some sort of payment for that work, have self-esteem and pride in what you're doing, and at the same time providing a service for someone who needs or wants that service.
And it still leaves wide open the rest of the solutions that civil society has to step up for those people who truly cannot make it on their own. There is room for that to occur as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to work on giving people a hand up and not a hand out, because it seems that over generations now, the government, well-intentioned, as you mentioned, has tried to provide a service or given things, and it becomes an entitlement. And entitlement has become such a bad word now because these things are given away, and when things are given away, they're worth exactly what you pay for them. So if you pay nothing, you want everything, you want it right now, and you become impatient if you don't get it.
But we've also
it's not reality.
We've also created a system that has priced people out of affordable health care. It's at no fault of their own.
Sure.
This great structure that has been put together with every intention of trying to provide people with health care, but ends up not, has really left a lot of people that can't afford it, and any solution that we come up with needs to attend with that.
There needs to be true competition, and the problem is hospitals have never competed, and the whole current thrust is to have hospitals run their local healthcare districts, and unfortunately, with their overhead, like you had mentioned about their pricing. My daughter, for example, had to have an x-ray, and at the local x-ray place it was $128, and the insurance company beat them up till $38 happened, and I paid $38, and that was okay, and they took it and accepted it. When she had to go to a big hospital health system and they had her do the same x-ray, the facility fee for this $38 x-ray, which I would have paid $128, maybe even twice that because it's a big hospital and a lot of people, it was $1,100, $1,100 for the same $128 but really $38 x-ray. And it's it's an interesting feature that as payment keeps going down for things, the price, the imaginary price keeps going up. And the imaginary price is not a price people pay, but the person whose insurance doesn't pay or there's no other mechanism, and they get the whole bill.
Right.
Imagine going to a laboratory and getting what would, if you paid for it directly, be maybe $100. But the lab is charging $1,200 just to try to capture that $100. And now, as a self-pay patient that wasn't knowledgeable, you're on the hook for the whole thing.
Right, you get hammered
Absolutely.
for the whole $1,200.
When if you went into it from the front, as you were saying, with a negotiated price and say, I'm willing to pay $100 for these labs. Let's do
And unfortunately,
them
we're gonna start that negotiating at $1,100. And that's the problem that we're stuck with, right? So we have to have the solutions for people who can't afford it, and until we really let real prices, we're going to have to deal with these artificial.
Well, look at two sectors of healthcare that don't operate under this model, right? You have LASIK surgery and you have cosmetic surgery, right? Mm-hmm. And those prices have gone down. I mean, especially LASIK surgery started off, $2,000-3,000 per eye, but because there's no insurance.
Now you get the second eye free.
You get the second eye free. And so, obviously you need to shop for who you're going to have, do that for you. But clearly the prices are driven down because it's the person receiving the service is the person paying for the service. And so cosmetic surgery, LASIK eye surgery, and then beyond healthcare, I mean, look what happens in technology. And in technology, it's a great place to look for the emptiness of this asymmetry of information argument, right? We don't know, I don't care how smart you are unless you're a real professional at it. You don't know the guts that goes into your computer. You don't know the guts that goes into your car, right? The people who make these things obviously know more about them than we, the consumers who are buying them, and yet nobody talks about an asymmetry of information there, and yet there's a free market which drives prices down in the presence of an asymmetry of technical information. So the argument doesn't hold water.
And it's interesting, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, but that people can do without LASIK surgery. That's just the icing on the cake. It's not real medicine. But I think Mr. Goldhill made a great point about with these high deductibles, people are going to be paying more and more out of pocket for the chronic diseases that is the bulk of what we spend our money on. The vast majority of healthcare expenditures are these chronic diseases. And those are things that you have time to think about. So it's, the emergency room, and those will be the last things we'll take care of. The first things will be what we have to cover out of pocket with these high deductibles, and more will become looking exactly like cosmetic surgery and LASIK surgery, but it'll be for your high blood pressure, it'll be for your diabetes treatment, it'll be for your angina.
Yeah, so for so long, as David said, since 1942 when the Standardization Act passed, which is what we were talking about here, the incentives have been misaligned, and it's not unusual at all that some of the institutions which we are concerned about, large hospitals, large insurance companies, the government, They haven't really had any incentive to do anything differently because they've been doing
quite the
well.
opposite, right?
They've been doing quite well under the distorted incentive system. So a suggestion that I would have is if they really would like doctors to be transparent in their pricing, well then okay, that's fine. If it's good for us, then it's good for them.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one of the prime drivers of this conference was the fact that we saw people without medical training and experience telling doctors how to practice. And we feel like the experts in any given topic should be the ones driving that conversation and controlling that situation. And so I really like having people like Mr. Goldhill to bring that part of the puzzle that I don't know about, at least personally. But I know all of you here on this panel have dual and probably more areas of expertise which can bridge that divide. You know, I think medicine for most doctors, most of us are mainly going to concentrate on medicine and are not going to know a lot about these other things. And it's the way it should be, because medicine is a complex task that requires focus and concentration. But I think it should be kind of the jewel in the heart of the lotus that has some protection from these outside forces of money, of policy, where as a physician, I would like to see my patient, keep up with the literature, give them my best recommendation, give them any alternatives that I may see in order that I think they should be listed. And then the patient, with their third-party payer, if they've contracted with them, the policymakers and so forth can go down that list and get the best thing that is financially and otherwise achievable. All of you have, again, I said multiple expertise. Easiest example might be Dr. Koriwchak as an ENT surgeon and as an IT programmer. And mixing those every day. He tells me he goes home at 10 o'clock at night, and if he's having a problem, his colleagues are having a problem, he starts programming, and the next day they're trying out something new. And that's the perfect example of someone who can bridge that gap. But I know in my own primary care practice, the previous practice I had was called comprehensive health care. And I just don't think it's that expensive or difficult for a trained physician to provide health care. You know, I just went to Cooperstown to the Major League Hall of Fame, and one of the Hall of Famers said, "Ain't much to being a ball player if you're a ball player." So I think the same thing is true here. So I've heard that 1/4 of all healthcare spending in the U.S. is on 1% of the population. 1/2 of all healthcare spending is on 5% of the population. Ain't much to doctor in the other 95% if you're a doctor. One thing I wanted to ask Mr. Goldhill, and we weren't able to get him here, was for questions, was does he think health care coverage should be provided by employers? And I'd like to ask the panel that question. Not that it couldn't be if that's what the employer and the employee agree upon, but as far as mandating, and you mentioned keep it simple, you were talking about the lemonade stand. The best advice I ever got in medical school was keep it simple, stupid. And I just think, why, when you have all these companies who have their particular area of expertise, Apple makes some of the best computers in the world, right? And we have some of the best physicians in the world here. But why does Apple then take a large portion of its resources, its spending, its efforts, and focus on something that's not particularly expert at it?
That's one of the things that I think we need to do is look where the obstacles are, look where the incentives are. And right now, the obstacle to people, there's obstacles that are built into our tax law and even our employment law that get in the way of individual ownership of your health insurance, or your employer assisting you in purchasing individual health insurance. So maybe it would be a good thing to have insurance supplied by the employer, maybe not, but let's at least make it sort of a level playing field, not try to do all this engineering in the tax code or your employment code, but let's find out what is the best, most cost-effective way to cover which types of medical care, because medical care isn't homogeneous. You have wellness care, you have sick care, you have really, really sick care, and you've got immediate emergencies. And they don't necessarily all have to have the same kind of financing. I don't know what the best way it is, but our system right now drives everybody through the tax code and through employment law into employer provided insurance.
Exactly, it's that tax issue. But the employer here is just an unnecessary third party. Why doesn't the employer provide the 1,000 other things that the employee needs to buy?
I think that there would be a lot of employers that would be happy to get out of the health insurance business.
Right.
And because of what happened in 1942 with the Standardization Act and a lot of other things that have happened since, it's become an expectation. And it was rather innocent at first. It didn't seem like it was going to be a problem. But like with so many things, for instance, the mortgage deduction that we have that still persists, which was supposed to be a stimulus plan after World War II, but it stayed. The Standardization Act stayed as well, and it has caused major distortion in the market. So there are lots of people that have proposed ways to level that tax playing field. Most recently, John Goodman just mentions it in his newest book. And you know, he's got an interesting idea that everyone in the United States should get the same tax benefit as a prepaid, almost like a refund, even if you didn't pay taxes to buy health insurance. One of my objections to that thought, frankly, and I'm sorry he's not here to talk to you directly, is that I think we have we've driven up costs because we have broken incentives in a system, and I am a little bit loath to incentivize a broken system in any way. I think we need to have families and individuals own their own policies. I think that as physicians, we should be able to present our bill to them, and if they have insurance that covers it, they should deal with the company. And I think that we were kind back in the 60s to say, oh, here's this health insurance form, doctor, could you fill it out? And of course, oh, okay, we'll fill it out. Here's this more complicated form, doctor, could you fill this out? Oh, now, doctor, the form's not going to come to me anymore. It's just going to come to you. Would your staff fill it out? I once asked my CEO, what is the CPT code for filling out health insurance forms?
Yeah.
I don't really think there is one.
Again, I don't know which is more effective. I mean, you may I'll be glad to fill that out. That'll be an extra $20 because and somebody said, oh, then I'll deal with it myself. But people can choose. Right. So I don't know what the right answer for that is.
But I agree with you, Dr. Armstrong, on the fact that it's kind of separated the person and their choice of physician or health care completely, because now you've got the insurance company, but beyond that, they're not responsible to the patient anymore. They're responsible to the employer. Right. Now, the employer is just looking to make a quick decision, what's best for their business. They're not looking at each person as individual. Like, Dr. Haynes, you would be best to have this kind of insurance, and you would, Dr. Strickland, be better to have this. Instead, there's, again, mismatched choices, and each person has their own moral code, ethic code, needs, wants. We're all unique individuals in that way, and that's why I think we should all be on a vigorous individual market for insurance where we all can choose what we want. If I want a little one, you want a big one, we can choose what our priorities are in our life instead of our employer choosing, or worse, our government saying, here's the three. We have small, medium, and large. They're all expensive. Which do you want? Yeah.
Not everybody in California has earthquake insurance, right?
But you don't have to live in California.
No, but I mean, I get to choose.
You can move to New Jersey and have your first tornado, which we had a month ago.
Yeah, and you choose. And so I have earthquake insurance. My neighbors probably don't. So there's just different ways of, like you say, and those are huge. That's a huge thing if something happens.
There's no doubt. Well, you both choose to live there. You choose to take money to help mitigate the risk. And your neighbor may say, you know what, I don't want to, or I don't have the money, or I'd rather buy X.
Yep.
But that brings up another problem, and that is if there is an earthquake and then your neighbor loses their house, they're not going to come to your door and knock on it and say, oh, I lost my house and I don't have insurance. Would you pay to rebuild it?
It's FEMA, the Fed, they're going to come to and ask for tax money to rebuild it, and that is a complicated question.
Yes.
Well, it all circles back to the whole idea of choice. I mean, we don't really, in an ideal world, I would think we don't have to decree that employers will provide health insurance. If an employer wants to, let them do it. If they don't want to, they don't have to. Let them compete in a truly free market, and then employees have whatever option they want to. Right? They can go to an employer that offers it if that's what they want, or get it somewhere else.
Right. You know, Einstein said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. Yeah. And so we've been operating kind of on, or shooting for E equals MC squared. You know, that is true genius. 130,000 pages of Medicare regulations is not genius. But we say, let the doctors and...
It's not genius, it's compliance.
Yeah, right.
If you can.
Let the doctors provide the medicine and the surgery. Let the employers, let the Apple build Apple computers, which they're one of the best in the world at, if not the best. Let the health insurance industry provide coverage for uncertainty, as David Goldhill said. The insurance model does not work for certain events. So I think it's just a matter of, let's keep it simple. Let's let experts do what they do. What kind of a drain must it be on the entire U.S. economy for companies like Apple to be spending maybe a third of their gross and their efforts in doing something they're not expert at? And at the same time, how much of our unemployment rate is due to the fact that the employer interviews a prospective employee, thinks this person can do the job, but, oh, you had a back problem last year. Don't want to get caught with that.
Well, yeah, and the incentives are crazy. In the Affordable Care Act, they talk now about, the 29ers, the people that are hired to work 29 hours.
Mm-hmm. And the 49ers, right? You don't want to get to your 50th employee either.
Right.
Or you trigger a bunch of bad things.
Certainly. Well, thank you, doctors. I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the panel and to interact. We'll be back tomorrow with more information, more excellent lectures and interactive discussions right here at mydoctorpractice.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.